day life. It's all well and fine to go out and have a mystical experience, but you can't live in the mystical experience. You have to live in the real life. And so what I do is show you how to go have the mystical experience and then come back and have a good life as a result. Hi, my name is Kelle Sparta. I'm a transformational shaman and a spiritual coach, spiritual business coach. And just to give you some background on me, I have been doing this stuff for as long as I can remember. My mother raised me in this. She said I was talking to ghosts in my crib. So from the time I was about 5 years old, she started bringing home things like Est, which was a precursor to Landmark Forum. It's the not kinder, gentler version. She had me studying Seth and Ram Dass and Abraham Hicks and J.C. Knight and all of the big people in the metaphysical world at that time. So I was really raised in metaphysics. She took me to psychic development classes and, the whole thing. So when people say, well, how long have you been a coach? I'm like, well, I have high school yearbook signatures that read like client testimonials. So it's not really what I do. It's who I am. Right. And I've been studying this stuff for 50 years now because I'm 55. And I've come through a variety of different genres, if you will. So I've studied Chinese medicine, Reiki. I'm a Reiki master teacher. I don't do that anymore, but I am. And, shamanism and Wicca and the whole nine yards, right? So I got dragged kicking and screaming into shamanism. I didn't even know what it was when I got started, but Wicca prepared me for it because it gave me ritual and an understanding of how magic works and all of that. And so it was really a good pathway to get me there. And so, I started my personal journey. So if I would just want to address shaman as a term, because a lot of people in the US are thinking these days that shaman and ayahuasca or another kind of plant journey are synonymous, and they are not. Okay, so I do not work with plant medicines. I don't have a problem with them. I just don't, it's not what I do. I am a transformational shaman. So if you ask 100 shamans what a shaman is, they're going to give you 100 different answers. And that's because what a shaman is depends upon what the shaman's gifts are. And so my gift is walking people through their personal evolution. I am an initiatrix. I initiate people from one layer of evolution to the next. And I've spent my entire lifetime studying a massive amount of different religions and different spiritual practices and different traditions. And what I have done is come to a center point, because we all know that if effectively they're all teaching the same thing. They're just teaching it with different language and from different perspectives. And so what I've done is sort of cross-pollinated everything and stitched it together, because I am an engineer brain with a massive connection to internet, to intuition and spirit. And so what that means is that I've taken my codifying engineer brain and put it towards understanding how the etheric world works and how to use the energy in a very specific, very practical way. So I practice what I refer to as thought alchemy and grounded woo, right? So I work with people to up-level their awareness of the world around them and their perspective, because oftentimes a perspective that's skewed will produce a experience of life that is unpleasant: anxiety, stress, overwhelm, burnout, constant fear of the other shoe dropping, all of these things, right? And so I work with people on their perspectives. I work with them on their limiting beliefs. I work with them on how to up level to the next level of spirituality, as well as how to develop their spiritual gifts. How do you control your energy? How do you manage your energy? How do you protect yourself, protect your space? How do you talk to your spirit guides? How do you do basic divination? All of these things, right? And I go from, sort of beginning level all the way up to super advanced level energy work. And so I love to work with people at all varieties of levels and help them to take things to the next level. So, I wrote a book called The Overachiever's Guide to Spiritual Awakening, and it is the 30,000-foot overview of what spiritual evolution looks like, including, what are the common blocks, because I've done over 3,000 energy reviews for people. And in doing that, I have discovered some common blocks that everybody has some of. Nobody has them all, but everybody has some of them. And so the book covers that. And it also covers, spiritual traps that people fall into, as well as the stages of spiritual evolution, how to identify which one you're in and what the way is to transcend from that level to the next. And so, there's some other stuff in there too, but it is, if you're coming into spirituality and you're trying to figure out how it works, because that's one of the hardest things, right? And especially today, because right now, there is more access to more information than ever before. But that means there's also more access to more misinformation than ever before, or half information, which is even more problematic, right? When I got involved in the 70s, it was the only people who were out in the spiritual world were the ones who were serious seekers. And that's because in the 70s, you were deemed a crackpot if you were into this stuff, right? And so you knew that the information you'd get was good, but you had to send away, had to cut out a piece of paper from the back of the book you bought at the bookstore and then snail mail it to somebody to get the tape series of the stuff that they were teaching. And so it took a while to get it. But nowadays, people are publishing stuff half researched, if at all. And and then other people are picking that up and republishing it. So even saying, hey, I saw this on 16 different sites, this must be true. Not always the case, right? I got asked for a quote the other day from a magazine, and they said, oh, well, I heard that you could burn this. And they were talking about, what was it? I can't remember. Bay leaf, I think. No, it was something else. They were like, you can burn this. And I'm like, please don't burn that. That's toxic when burnt. Look it up. That would be bad. Don't burn that. And they're like, what the person meant was you could make a smudge pot out of it, which is to boil it, and that would be fine. But if you burn it, it's problematic. And see, this is the thing, right? These are the types of things. And so what I work with people on is cross-pollinating all these knowledges and putting them all together into a logical framework that makes sense, that is practical and functional in the day-to-day life. It's all well and fine to go out and have a mystical experience, but you can't live in the mystical experience. You have to live in the real life. And so what I do is show you how to go have the mystical experience and then come back and have a good life as a result. And so that's what I really work on, as I work on creating, helping people to get to a place where they are empowered and in their sovereign selves, meaning you're comfortable in your own skin, you love yourself first, you give from your overflow instead of your emptiness, and you make powerful choices to move your life forward. Now, I also work with business owners on that. And so that's the other stage of it, is if you bring this into your business, the energetics of that are amazing, right? So you can look and you can see in advance what different marketing initiatives are going to do, and you can feel into the energy of how different things are going to go. If you're thinking about merging with another company, you can look at whether or not that merger is going to be a good thing or bad thing. There's lots and lots of ways that you can do this. And there's also the healing aspect, which energetically is how do you take and manage your body's energy and your body's processes, right? So there's medical intuitive work. There's the ability to adjust energy. I had a client once who was on an international flight, and something took a bite out of her and left some poison in her system energetically. And by the time she got to me, I was like, oh my God, this is not good, right? So I literally had to roll back time to go back to when she first got bit to fix it, because the poison had spread too far, right? So some of this stuff is the sort of things that we look at too. Who knew you could get bit by something on an international flight? I didn't know that. That was the first time I'd ever seen it. But these are the sorts of things that show up in people's day-to-day lives. And the challenge with living in the Western world is that, unlike in tribal cultures where people knew that the shaman was who you went to when you weren't feeling right, people don't know to do that here. And so, thankfully she was a client already, and she was like, I feel weird, but it still took her several days to reach out to me. So, this is the sort of thing that you have to learn what it is that you talk to a shaman about. And then you need to know who you want to reach out to, because different shamans do different things, right? So I came up, I want to give you just a little more history. So I came up through a process. So in 1998, I went through my first Saturn return, and Saturn returns are when Saturn comes back to the place it was in your natal chart. So where it was the day you were born. And the challenge is that Saturn's a great disruptor, right? So when I was 28, it came through hardcore. I just destroyed my life. I divorced my husband. I had him take the dog. I sold the house. I sold my business. I quit the nonprofit I was running, and I moved out of state to live with a bunch of people I met at the Renaissance Fair. My former business partner said that I had run off and joined the circus, and he wasn't quite wrong, right? But that started a 4-year deep dive, deep healing journey for me. And I lived in a house with a bunch of other people who were all on a healing journey as well, and we all facilitated for each other. It was a very beautiful place to be. And it ended with me ending up on walkabout. So, walkabout is an Aboriginal term, and it means to go out into the world until you find yourself. And most people think of walkabout as being something out in the desert, and that's because that's where they live in Australia. But here in the U.S., where I was at the time, I'm in Panama now, but where I was at the time, it meant going out in my car and driving in the world and taking it to different places. And so I was on the road. I was homeless for a year, going where spirit took me. And that journey was so transformative for me. I went 14,000 miles in that year. And in the course of that time, I learned so much about myself, including around boundaries and who I was. Because when you're an empath, it's really hard to know who you are because you're constantly mixing your energy with other people. So I didn't know who I was. I was constantly just a reflection of whoever it was that they needed to have me be in the moment. And that was not entirely helpful for me. I mean, it was great for the other people, but it wasn't great for me, right? And so I really learned a lot from that journey, and I'm still learning from that journey. In fact, while I was on that journey, I had 2 different card readers say that I wouldn't know the full results of my journey for 10 to 20 years. So it is now 23 years later, and they were right. So yeah, so that's sort of who I am and what I do. So what would you like to know?
Thanks for sharing, Kelly. I'm wondering if maybe we could chat a little bit more about the idea of empaths taking on other people's energy. If there's somebody listening who identifies as an empath and that's something that they're currently dealing with, what kind of tools would you give them to, be able to separate their energy?
Great question. I actually have a free e-course on my website for empaths called Boundaries for Empaths. If you go to kellesparta.com, spelled like you see it on the screen, note the weird spelling of Kelly, and you go to the blog on the right-hand side, it'll have a little picture of a lady with a crystal, and it says Boundaries for Empaths. You can sign up for it there. It gives you everything you need to change. Ultimately, what you're experiencing is a function of how you're holding your energy field. And so it teaches you how to hold your energy field differently. And I think it's a 38-minute long video or audio of all the different ways in which being an empath is impacting your life. So if people call you intimidating, that's an empath thing. If you get overwhelmed in crowds, that's an empath thing. If you have a hard time breaking up with people and you keep going back to somebody even though you know they're bad for you, that's an empath thing, right? And all of these things are addressed, and more are addressed as part of changing the way you hold your energy field. So that is effectively the answer.
Thanks for that. So I'm kind of interested. It sounds like you've done a lot in terms of integration. I'm sure you've had tons of cool mystical experiences. Is there any that you can share with us?
Oh, sure. Duh. Do I have many? Oh my God, which one is the question, right? So, okay. So this one's a very simple one. It's about intuition, right? So I was living with a friend of mine years ago, and she was going to take a flight to her brother's house. And her brother lived like 2.5 hours flight away. And just before she left, I was feeling the need to like pack her a food in a bag and give it to her. Now, she is the world's most efficient packer. And so there was no way she was going to take more than a very small bag of stuff. And I packed it with as much protein rich foods as I could get, right? And then I was like, here, take this with you. And she was like, I don't need that. It's only 2.5 hours. I'm just take it. Just take it. And she's like, why? I'm like, I don't know, but you need it. Just take it. She's like, I will only take it if it fits in my bag. And I was like, yeah, okay. And so she put it in her bag. It barely fit, right? I really wanted to give her more food, but I knew she wouldn't take it. So she takes it with her and she goes to the airport. And 9 hours later, she texts me and she says, I am still in the airport. All of the food places are closed. I have eaten everything you gave me, and I could have eaten more. Thank you. How did you know? And I was like, I didn't know. I just knew I needed to give it to you. And so, this is how intuition works, right? Is you just have to go with it and be okay with not knowing sometimes. And because I really didn't know. I didn't know what it was about. So, that's a very small story, but I've got tons of other ones if you want something a little bit more woo-woo or, ghosty or whatever.
Give us the woo-woo. We love the woo-woo. Yes. Give me whatever you got. I love hearing this stuff.
Okay. So the very first ghost that I can remember that I saw was I was 16 years old. Now I am blind as a bat. I can't see without my glasses or my contacts. And I was in bed and I lived in Southern California at the time. And it was middle of the night. I don't remember why I woke up, but I woke up. Now, remember, I can't see anything. When I say I'm blind as a bat, I'm like, I can't see further than, a few inches in front of my face. And that's been true my whole life. So I saw very clearly without my glasses on a ghost of a prospector, a gold prospector, standing at the foot of my bed. So like 1800s type prospector, right? And he was standing at the foot of my bed just looking at me. And I freaked out and I screamed. And he disappeared from the waist up and it left his legs behind. And somehow that was worse. So I just was like, go away, right? And he did. I think I scared him as much as he scared me. So that was my first ghost. There was a house that I lived in Connecticut, and it also came with a resident ghost, and it was a Revolutionary War soldier. And it came from Fort Griswold across the street from me, which had been a Revolutionary War fort. And this ghost, when I first bought the house, I laid down to go to sleep and my bed started vibrating, started just like shaking and vibrating. Not like hard, but just enough that it was like, I can't sleep, right? So, I'm practical. I got up. I was like, oh, maybe the furnace kicked on and the furnace shakes the house. Let me go look and see. And then I went downstairs and furnace had not kicked on. And I was like, okay, well, let me take a look at the map in the area and see if there's a railroad track that runs nearby that shakes the house or something. Because it was my first night in the new house, right? No railroad track that would have accounted for it. And I was like, that's a little freaky. So I went back to bed and I laid down to go to sleep and the bed shook again. And I was like, stop it. And it stopped, right? So over the course of time, I came to, come into conversation and connection with this ghost. And we came to an agreement because he was lonely. He was just like, talk to me. And I'm like, you cannot shake my bed when I'm trying to sleep. That is not allowed. I'm like, please do not mess with me unless, I stop talking to you entirely. That's okay. You can do that if you want me to talk to you, but you need to stop it when I'm trying to sleep. And he was like, okay. And so I would just chat with him and he protected my house for me, which was lovely, right? So, and then of course there was the magical household that I moved into after that, where I did all of that work with my friends. That had a ghost of a little girl who used to run up and down the stairs because it was a Victorian house from the early 1800s or late 1800s, I think. And there was a ghost in the basement, and he would like sneak up behind you and go, "Boom," right? He was doing it to have fun, but one day he was just freaking people out. My roommates would be like, "There's a ghost in the basement, stop it!" And I was like, okay. So we got rid of the ghost in the basement because he was freaking them out. But that in that house there were so many weird things that happened, because when you have 5 different people living on the premises and friends coming over, all of whom are magical practitioners, weird stuff starts to happen, right? So we actually developed a series of rules, magical rules for the house, that were a function of the fact that we had so many people doing so much different work in the house. And so each one came about because somebody screwed something up. And so the first one was no mucking about with time and space within the confines of the property, because the day that somebody did that, everybody was late for everything. We were just like, this isn't okay, stop it, right? And then, so it's no mucking about with time and space within the confines of the property. If you summon it, it's your job to banish it. Never summon anything bigger than your head. Don't open doors and windows that you don't know where they go energetically. If doors and windows open of their own accord, do not wait to see what happens. Inform the house warden immediately. If the ward falls, if the physical representation of the word falls, it's time to reward the house. And always, always, always take out the trash. Oh, I forgot one. And there, ghosts, corporeal and non-corporeal, can stay a maximum of 3 days, and they must stay in your room, because Rachel kept inviting over the fairies and they kept messing with my stuff. So yeah, all of these things. Lots and lots of different stories, so many different options to tell you. This is just a sampling.
Can you talk a little bit about fairies? Okay, this is where my brain is going.
Okay.
How do you accept the fact that these things are happening and that you have not lost your mind?
Yeah, I get that one a lot. So the first thing, when I talk to people about talking to their spirit guides or energies on the other side, or ghosts, or whatever, right? Fairies, trolls, blah blah blah. The first thing is that when something surprises you, it's not you, because you can't surprise yourself, right? So if you got surprised by something said, not you, right? So that's an easy confirmation. The other thing that happens is that you start to look at these things and you start to get confirmations from other people, right? So I used to own a metaphysical store, and a friend of mine and I ran it together, and we would do a psychic fair day once a month, and inevitably we would end up with related people, right? He would do a reading for somebody on one side of the room, I'd do it on the other side of the room. We'd compare notes at the end of the day. And, I remember one reading, he was talking to the mother-in-law, I was talking to the daughter-in-law. I was telling the daughter-in-law, you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. You need to really stop relying on your husband as much and start really being more self-determinate. And she asked me when she was going to get pregnant, and I gave her a date. And so on the other side of the room, he's talking to the mother-in-law, and she's saying, when am I going to have a grandbaby? Now, pregnant versus grandbaby, he gave her a date 9 months later than I gave the other girl, right? Which was very fun for a confirmation, right? We didn't hear each other. We were on opposite sides. And then he looked at her and said, but you're not going to have a grandbaby if you don't tell your son to keep it in his pants, because she will leave him. And so on one side of the room, I'm prepping her to be strong enough to leave him. And on the other, but I didn't know about the cheating. They didn't tell me that. That wasn't relevant. I was prepping her to be strong enough to leave him. And on the other side, he's saying, tell your son to keep it in his pants, right? So it's that sort of thing you get confirmation on when you just keep going and you keep opening your mouth. If you're learning how to do psychic readings, so one of the best things you can do is just practice a lot and just do it with the understanding that everything that comes out of your mouth is probably wrong. When you start the reading that way with somebody, with a willing participant, then you take all of the I've got to get it right, is this right, things out of your way. and you open yourself up to really just be able to say what you're seeing. And, don't try to interpret it too much in the beginning, right? Just say what you're seeing. And they can help you interpret it, because sometimes you're seeing stuff that isn't interpretable by you. It's something specific to them. So the more you practice, the more evidence you get that it's real. And once you start to recognize your communication pathways, then you really start to find it easier to have conversations with all these different things, right? If you just consider that it's dimension's not the right word, but awareness level is probably the right word. That some things live on a different awareness level than we do. If you consider that the human visual spectrum is very narrow compared to the full visual spectrum that exists in the world, then it's very easy to begin to believe that you may not see things that are there, right? Because they operate outside of our visual spectrum. And so when you're tapping into stuff like this, it's very simple to be able to just be like, oh, well, I'm seeing through my mind's eye instead of through my physical vision. And, understanding the pathway that things happen, and understanding what different things mean for you, because everybody's got their own way of quote unquote seeing, right? Some people feel, some people hear, some people see with their eyes, some people see with their mind's eye, right? And so, and most people have a combination, right? So a lot of it's about really being able to understand and interpret your own experience, because I tell people all the time, well, tell me everything you're experiencing right now. And I'm like digging and digging and digging, because they're like, I've got nothing. And I'm like, well, but what are you seeing? I'm not seeing anything. What are you hearing? Well, I just hear this weird buzz. Ah, so you are experiencing something. What are you feeling? I don't know. I just got this weird tingle on the back of my arm, but that's not anything. It's like, yes, everything is relevant, right? So sometimes it's about learning how to interpret it, right? Everybody thinks they're crazy in the beginning. That's just the nature of the beast, right? Because you're learning to operate on a level that you have not operated before, that you do not understand, that you don't have an orientation to, all of these things. And that a lot of people for many generations have said is crackpot stuff, right? Now, the world is changing, and a lot more people are actually coming into this world and understanding it. And it's become more mainstream in terms of intuition and law of attraction and things like that. Those have gone mainstream. And so this stuff is, and science is catching up to us. Quantum physics is catching up. They're starting to understand the stuff that we've been talking about for generations, right? But you still got to talk yourself into it, right? That's actually one of the phases of evolution. Is the first thing, the first stage is there's got to be more to life than this, and you go looking for what that might be, and then you find spirituality, and then you go, okay, does this stuff really work? Holy crap, this stuff really works. I must tell everyone I know and drag them out to classes with me so they don't think I'm nuts. Also known as so I don't think I'm nuts, right? And then you go into the the proof stage. And the prove it stage. And then the prove it stage is, well, this works for other people, but does it work for me? And that's where I don't know if I could truly trust it. I don't know. All of the doubts that you had in the earlier stage come up to the surface as you start to try and do it yourself. And the irony is you're already doing it, right? But we don't believe that we're doing it because we don't believe in our own power, and we don't believe in our ability to create our reality, and we don't believe it's really your limiting beliefs that are in the way. It's not can I do it? It's can I believe I can do it? And so that's the differential.
Wow, you made that really simple. And as you were doing it, I was thinking about my own journey. Like, oh yeah, I went through all of those things too. That's really great. Let me ask you, I heard you say something about like that you had a bunch of spiritual friends. That's part of the story that I heard. I'm curious if maybe you can share a little bit about how you were able to find those people. I hear a lot in spiritual spaces that people can't find others who understand them.
Yeah, so finding spiritual friends is actually not that difficult. So the first thing is, you go to retreats, you go to events, you go to workshops, you'll find like-minded people in those places. For me, I went to the alternative spaces, right? So people who have sort of alternative spiritual beliefs also generally have alternative interests in general. So they're in the cosplay community, they're in for me, it was the Renaissance fair workers communities. They're in sci-fi conventions, kink spaces, they're in tantra communities, they're in personal growth workshop communities, they're in anything that's alternative, anything that is not the norm is where you will find these. But pagan events, right? All of these things are places where you will find a lot of the music festivals. When you're going into spaces that are based around alternative ideas. So, like the polyamory community has a lot of people, the Network for New Culture people, all of these spaces have people who are alternative spirituality as well as alternative other things. So, if you're looking for people, those places are the best places to find them.
Really helpful. Thank you. I've really enjoyed our time together today. I just want to see if there's anything else that you'd like to share to feel more complete about this time. And then can you let people know where they can get a hold of you?
Sure. Oh, let me just feel in and see if there's a message for your community. Give me a second. Okay. What they're saying is the world is in a massive shift at the moment. There's massive upheaval going on, but to take heart because there are important breakdowns happening in order for breakthroughs to happen. And so, don't panic when you see things shifting. There is a light on the other side, right? And that to only worry about the things you have control over, right? You can worry about anything you want, but it doesn't actually do any good. And 99% of what we worry about never comes to pass anyway, right? So the thing to keep in mind is that the only things worth worrying about are things that you actually have control over. If you don't, then just, look at it, do what you can. So, if you want to say something to somebody or protest something or write your congressperson or whatever it is, right? Then do that thing and let it go and move on with your life because you will freak yourself out and spin yourself up for no good reason, right? It doesn't serve any purpose, right? So your focus needs to be on living the life that you want to live in the best way that you can. And part of that is recognizing where you have power and where you don't, and not giving your power over to the places that you don't have power to change things. So, with that said, the best way to reach me. So, first off, you can listen to my podcast. It's Spirit Sherpa, SHERPA. That's my podcast. And you can find me at kellesparta.com. That's spelled like you see it on the screen, KELLE, Sparta.com. And, come on over to the site, get your copy of Boundaries for Empaths clicking the blog post or blog thing on the navigation bar. Yeah, I can talk. And, check out all the offerings that I have because there are many and varied, including retreats here in Boquete, Panama, where I live now. So, and that's great for getting out of the energy of the US and into the lovely energy here in Boquete, Panama. It's fantastic. I live here. It's amazing. The locals call it tranquilo. I live on the side of a volcano and it's so wonderful and so beautiful. So, with that said, I think that's everything I wanted to make sure I said to people. So,
Thanks so much for your willingness to serve our community, Kelle. We'll see you next time.
my pleasure. Have a good one.